This upcoming season, the Penguins are going to need a lot more from their bottom six, and one of this offseason signings looks to help them do just that.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp. You can follow me on Twitter at synonym for wet, joined as always by the one and only Hunter Hodes. You can follow him on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. You can give our show's account a follow at LO_Penguins. And we thank you for making this your first listener watch of the day because we're your team every day. And don't forget that we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, as well as YouTube. And before we get started today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, so one thing Hunter and I are doing, we were actually going to lead the show with it yesterday, but then the radio news came out and that kind of through our show's rundown into flux. One thing we're going to do in the lead up to training camp, since we know that the calendar has turned to September, a lot of people are starting to tune back in because we know that there is hockey this very month that will be played in the National Hockey League. So with that in mind, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of give everybody a little bit of a refresher on who the Penguins have signed, who they've traded for, little tidbits like that you may have missed or forgotten about this summer, because it's been a pretty warm and sunny summer. So doubtful you're sitting at home reading hockey articles like us sickos. So for those of you who may have missed it, yesterday we talked about one other bottom six player. Today we're going to talk about another, and that is Blake Lizotte, who the Penguins signed on July 1st. They signed him to a 2-year deal worth $1.85 million. And really, this is, if I have to sum it up, one of my favorite moves of the offseason for the Penguins, because this is a guy that he's all of 26 years old. He's a very reliable fourth line center. He had a very solid career so far with the Los Angeles Kings and didn't really seem to fit the mold of a guy who would become available on the free agent market. It felt like the Los Angeles Kings had a guy that they could hold on to for a very affordable deal and would continue to produce well for them in the bottom six. And the minute he became available, the Penguins and Kyle Dubas pounced. And I like this move a lot. You look at his last couple of seasons, very productive in Los Angeles, 21-22 in 70 games, 10 goals, 24 points, 22-23, career high 11 goals, career high 34 points. Last year, he misses about 20 games, plays 62, but still, as a fourth line center, manages to put up 7 goals, 8 assists for 15 points. And one thing, Hunter, you know I've been talking about it for a while now. They need a lot more sandpaper and guys who will make them hard to play against, not guys who are goons, but the last couple seasons, this guy has not been afraid to throw his body around. Last 3 seasons, starting with 21-22, 74 hits, 22-23, 96 hits, and last year, 64 hits. So this guy can put up solid fourth line production numbers, and you watch his tape, he is not an easy player to play against.
Agreed. And you remember just back on July 1, the Penguins gave out a lot of those 1-year deals just for some reclamation projects, which we've discussed a lot on the show throughout the offseason. Blake Lizotte, that was not one of them. This was one that Kyle Dubas gave a little bit of term to, and I think that should show everyone what Kyle Dubas in this front office thinks of this player. This is someone who is very good in his own zone. He can play any situation. He can also bring some offense to the table. You brought up his counting stats. Very solid production. I think if he did not miss those 20 games last year, he probably would have been right in line with what he did the previous 2 seasons, Pat, especially his career higher where he had 11 goals and 34 points. I think, again, in those 20 games, he would have been, I think he definitely would have had double-digit goals. Maybe not as many assists, but it would have come close to the amount of points that he had that year overall. This is someone that does bring a physical edge to his game. I think this is, again, going to be someone who becomes a fan favorite pretty quickly with the style of play that he has. Also, his underlying numbers this year were really strong. I touched on this back during the July 1 episode, but when he was on the ice, the Kings had about 53% of the shot attempts, only 16 goals against at 5-on-5 when he was on the ice. Also 52% expected goal share rate, 99 high danger chances for, 92 high danger chances against, and also, only 8 high danger goals against when he was on the ice in 62 games this year. Those are pretty solid numbers overall for a fourth line center. We've been wanting the Penguins to upgrade that spot for the last couple of years because, again, no offense to Jeff Carter, he really wasn't playing that well in that spot for the last year and a half. Honestly, probably 2 years. We could call it a spade at this point. Now you upgrade that spot. You bring in someone who is a lot more younger, is better in all 3 zones. I think this has the potential to be a really strong signing for the Penguins throughout this season and next season. I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do when opening night comes here in October.
Right. This was a very savvy move by Kyle Dubas, bringing this kid into the fold. And to your point of saying you think he's going to be a fan favorite, I agree with you. And I think his words back it up. We talked about this about a month ago when he first had his introductory media availability, where he said, for me, I just bring some more youth and some energy to kind of give the team a heartbeat or some life in some games. And that's what I do well. When we maybe don't have our A game, I tend to bring players into the fight, whether it be with tenacity, speed, forechecking, or whatever that may be. And like I said, you go back and you watch this player's tape, he is a tenacious forechecker, even as a center. You would expect him as a center kind of be the last guy out of the defensive zone on the breakout, then kind of playing center field, so to speak, in the offensive zone. He's not afraid to mix it up in the corners. You go watch his tape. He'll throw a hit. He'll go to those dirty areas. And he admitted himself that you grow up at the size he is, because he's not a large player. He's 5'9", 175, but he basically plays like he should be 7-8 inches taller and 20 pounds heavier. And that catches a lot of teams off guard because they're expecting this guy to kind of maybe be more of a finesse player, maybe look to make a play or make a move. And that's not his game. He shoots the puck, he throws hits, and it's what we have needed from the bottom 6 the last few years. You bring up Jeff Carter, that scoring touch kind of started to go away, as did the foot speed, and everything started to unravel. You look at Lizotte's game, perfectly tailored for a fourth line center role. He, like you were saying with the underlying numbers, good in the defensive zone. He suppresses chances very well. And when he's on the ice, if they're not in the defensive zone where he's suppressing the opposing team's offense, he's helping create offense in the offensive zone. And obviously, again, I'm not going to say that this team is getting back to contender status, but you think back to the 16 and 17 teams. There were nights where the big guns weren't at their best or they were being sufficiently checked by the opposition. It was those third and fourth lines that stepped up to produce. And that's something the Penguins have sorely missed over the past few years.
100%. And also he brings an added element to a penalty kill that I think needs to be a little rejuvenated heading into the season. I do like the unit at times, but I still feel like it has more to give overall, especially when it goes up against some of the really good power plays in the NHL. I kind of feel like this unit gets exposed a little bit, for example, against the Rangers power play, just using them as an example. They have one of the best power plays in the league. I felt like at times last season, the Penguins penalty kill was exposed a little bit against that unit. And I do think Lizotte, this past season, he played 105 total minutes on the penalty kill. The season before that, he played 108 minutes. These past 2 seasons are the most he's played on the penalty kill. The Kings were using him a lot more. I definitely think the Penguins are going to use that to their advantage and maybe play him even more than 105, 108 minutes. I could see them playing him, 120, 130 minutes on the penalty kill. It is good that the Penguins have other options for the kill as well, namely Brian Rust for a forward. He's one of their top penalty killers for a forward. You can throw out Marcus Pettersson out there. We all know Chris Letang has also been getting penalty kill minutes as well these last couple of years, but it never hurts to add another forward to that mix where we all know how great he is at 5-on-5 with suppressing chances. Now he can go do that on the penalty kill, lead to some clears, blocks, all that good stuff. He plays very fearless despite being only 5'9" in the NHL. So, hey, Pat, we all know you're a short guy on this podcast. Everyone knows that Pat is a very short human being. So, Pat, look at that. Someone who's 5'9" is, defying the odds a little bit there.
Hey, it's always nice to see a fellow short king getting a
Yes.
chance, even though I'd trade kind of a whole heck of a lot to even be 5'6", let alone 5'9". But that's beside the point. That's going to do it, though, for our first segment. When we return, we're going to talk about another current Penguin who plays in the bottom six, who had a pretty solid run on the international level these past couple of weeks. Hunter and I will get into that right after this. But first, we're going to tell you about our sponsor, and that is Game Time. You guys know the story. Hunter knows the story. But if only Game Time existed when I was still buying tickets from scalpers at the old Mellon Arena, and I would have been able to get good seats instead of tickets in a row in a section that did not exist. And Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. Game Time Picks filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Pick an upcoming live event on the app, browse through the seats on Game Time Picks, and you'll find great deals. There are so many awesome features on Game Time. I have become a huge fan of this app. I'm looking forward to checking out Game Time Picks, but for some other great features, there's all-in pricing that lets you toggle the price right up front, so you're not hit with any of those annoying surprise fees when you're at checkout. Seat views will get you a panoramic view from your seat in the app before you buy your tickets. And of course, there is their lowest price guarantee, where Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference when you buy your tickets. And of course, Game Time coverage covers your purchase with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, you create an account and redeem code LOCKONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time. What time is it? It's game time. All right, welcome back to the Wednesday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp, joined as always by the illustrious Hunter Hodes. And we were just talking about Blake Lizotte coming in to be a catalyst to help this bottom six improve. However, this past week, someone who at the moment, for the very least, still on the Penguins, had a big week for Team Denmark, and that is Lars Eller. They were playing to qualify for the upcoming Winter Olympics, and Denmark will be going to the Winter Olympics thanks to a great effort from Lars Eller. He finished this tournament with 2 goals and 2 assists in 3 games played, and one of those goals was an overtime winner against Japan. And I got to say, we have spoken about Lars Eller quite a lot. One of the things we bring up quite a few times is that in an ideal world, if this team was a contender, Lars Eller would be your 4th line center. He would not be your 3rd line center, but he played very well last year. And I think, again, you look at the way he played in this tournament. Now, this was a qualifying tournament with a bunch of countries who are fighting to get into the Winter Olympics. They don't have their automatic bids, say like the US, Canada, Sweden, teams like that. So these teams kind of on the outside looking in for the most part. The competition isn't really all that tight. There's 3 or 4 teams you would say that are probably worthy of going to the Olympics, Denmark being one of them. But then there's a lot of teams that you look at and go, okay, these are developing programs. The talent pool isn't all that great, but still a must-win situation for teams like Denmark and everybody in them. And with a guy like Lars Eller stepping up and scoring a big goal like that in overtime to help push his team to the Olympics, it says to me that this guy, if this team finds itself playing meaningful games, it's a guy that they can still rely on.
Right. I mean, he's always been a clutch player throughout his career. I mean, just going back to some of his playoff numbers with Montreal way back when in 13-14, 5 goals, 13 points in 17 games when the Capitals won the Stanley Cup in the 17-18 season. He played 24 games, 7 goals, 18 points in those 24 games. When the games get that much more important, he's always there to step up. And that's exactly where he was here with Denmark. Congratulations to Denmark on getting to the 2026 Olympics. But yeah, I mean, if the Penguins do decide to keep this player for the season and not move him before the season, considering how many forwards there are, just with the logjam overall for this team, I do think he will very much still have a place in this lineup, considering what he did last year. Scored double-digit goals, had 30-plus points last season. He can still play a pivotal role in the bottom six. Would I maybe have him above Kevin Hayes for third line center right now? No, because I think Hayes is a better playmaker, but he's still a good option to have if a player or two in the bottom six gets a bit banged up. Say someone like Lizotte gets hurt, or again, Hayes gets hurt. You can put Eller there in that center spot and have him cook like he did last year for the Penguins in that third line center spot. He was a lot better in that spot than I thought he would be this past season. So, he's always been a big game player throughout his career, and I'm not really surprised by this. You look at the groups for the Olympics in 2026, Group A, Canada, Sweden, Switzerland, Italy. Group B, that's where Denmark is actually. Denmark with Czechia, Germany, and Finland. Denmark will have a shot, I think, of getting out of that group, but if I had to pick two favorites right now, it's probably Finland and Czechia, with just the amount of talent that those countries have at their disposal. And then Group C, Russia, if they are in, United States, Slovakia, and Latvia. France will join if Russia is not allowed to participate in the Olympics that year. Again, Group A, I know the two favorites with Canada, Sweden. Group B, Finland and Czechia. Group C, I would say Russia if they're allowed to play in the United States. But, if Russia's not there, I would maybe go one of Slovakia or Latvia potentially to come out with the United States. So that's going to be a really fun tournament. And, just again, congrats to Denmark and especially Lars Eller on helping his country get to the Olympics that year. It's going to be awesome seeing the NHL players go back. And what is it now? Less than a year and a half at this rate? It's a little less than a year and a half. So just super excited overall.
Yeah, that's going to be, it's going to be obviously so fun to get NHLers back on the world stage again. We've missed that so much. And here's the thing I want to pivot to real quick. And we've talked, again, we'll kind of keep this in the theme of what we did in the first segment where, hey, we're kind of just giving our listeners a little bit of a refresher on what's been discussed and what's happened over the offseason, because we know September is right when people start tuning back into hockey. It's when you start really feeling like hockey weather again. It's been nice little chilly weather here a little bit, so to speak, in Pittsburgh. So we know hockey's right around the corner. But I pose it to this. I pose this question to you, Hunter. Does Lars Eller stay on this team into opening night? Or do you think that there is a move to be made with this logjam to where maybe they see Lars Eller as someone better suited to bolster this roster in this prospect pool moving forward?
See, I keep going back and forth on who they're going to move out. I definitely think a trade is going to be made just because of how many forwards there are jockeying, for such, I think, few spots overall in this lineup. I mean, you look at the top six, there's really one spot players are going to be going for, and that's on Crosby's left wing. You look at the bottom six, I would say, 2 to 3 of those are pretty locked up, but then the rest, they're all up for grabs, but there's just so many forwards that are going to be going for those. So, I mean, I think of the players that could be moved, of the ones in the bottom six, I think Eller is the one that can bring back the most value considering what he did last year. Again, with 15 goals, 31 points overall for this team. He can maybe bring you back, an okay prospect, maybe a, mid-round pick, maybe even a higher pick potentially as well, if you really sell high on him. Teams are always looking for help even before the season, just because, that's the first time that teams are able to, look at the roster and training camp, look at the preseason. If injuries arise or something like that, teams will have an ability to, open up some cap space, put someone on LTIR and all that good stuff. So I think right now, I definitely think a move is going to be made. If I had to make a guess, and this is strictly a guess, which I could be dead wrong on, I do think Eller a little bit more than Achari gets moved, but I could see it going the other way around, or maybe someone else getting moved as well. It's going to be really fascinating to see how this competition really shapes itself out over these next few weeks when training camp starts in, about less than 2 weeks now at this rate. So that's my answer on that.
Yeah, and I think if you were to ask me, I think Eller does get moved just because it's a very affordable contract. It's in its last year. He had 15 goals last year, and they weren't fluke goals. He earned all 15 of them. And you look out west at some of the teams who are looking to make a move, because obviously Edmonton still sits atop the table, especially after locking up Draisaitl yesterday. And you look at a couple teams like Dallas, like Utah, like Detroit. Utah, obviously, first year, they've got an ownership that's committed to spending money and actually doing the things that Arizona wouldn't. And they've got plenty of cap space, and they're going to need some good veteran presence on that team. You look at Detroit, something has to give here with the Yzer plan. They eventually have to get into the playoffs and show progress. And if you can get a good veteran on an affordable deal like that, that can help this team get pushed into the playoffs. And Dallas, one of the best teams in the West, ton of cap space. And if you can get, again, an affordable fourth line center like Lars Eller, you can probably pay a price back to the Penguins that would be a mutually beneficial trade where both teams come out well on this, where the Penguins might get a younger prospect inside of Dallas's system, or even a roster forward that maybe Dallas is willing to part with. Now, obviously, I haven't looked at all the possibilities on that, but when you look strictly at salary cap space, those are three teams in a couple in the West and Detroit that I think would be well suited for Lars Eller's services. And like we've said, there's such a logjam at forward right now that you just look at it from that perspective of this guy has a ton of value and it can help serve both your short and long-term goals.
Right. And I do think in terms of, which teams could come calling, I do think the West is more likely than the East overall, just because I feel like, a little part of me feels like the Penguins would want to deal him to a Western Conference team that they're really not going to face too much during the season. But also the main reason why I say that is because I feel like the Western Conference kind of suits his game a little bit more. I mean, don't get me wrong. He was real good for the Penguins last year, but I feel like if he were to get moved, I do think a team in the West would just make more sense just due to, I think, how, a lot of teams play, in the Western Conference. I definitely think overall, when I compare some of the teams in the East to the West, I feel like some teams in the West aren't as fast as some of the teams in the East. So I feel like, just being on a team that's maybe not, I would say, as quick as some of these other teams, I do think could work some wonders for him as well. But so, yeah, if I had to guess, I think he goes to a Western Conference team. But again, we'll see. Camp opens up in a couple weeks. We have to see what happens here over the next month because, the season's coming up.
It'll be very interesting because there are still a lot of decisions to be made before this team takes the ice for opening night. But that'll do it here for the second segment. When we return, we're going to finish this episode and have a little bit of fun. The Penguins dropped their promotional schedule for this upcoming season. Hunter and I are going to have a little bit of fun with that, talking about the giveaways and a few of the theme nights, and we will do that right after this. All right, welcome back to the final segment of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am Patrick Damp, joined as always by Hunter Hodes. And Hunter, it's coming up here in a couple of months, not just the Penguins hockey season, but Thanksgiving. And if you are expecting to have people over for Thanksgiving and you want to look real classy, I would say one of the first games you should buy tickets to for the Pittsburgh Penguins this year is their Saturday, November 23rd game against the Utah Hockey Club, who we spoke about in the second segment, because the Penguins will be giving away a Penguins-themed Zamboni gravy boat. Honey, the good company's coming over. Break out the good china, and I mean the Zamboni gravy boat. So, like I said, the Penguins dropped their promotional schedule. That one is just so funny to me. I had to mention that right off the rip, but you got a couple of your typical giveaways like you do every year. Opening night against the Rangers, you got your magnet schedule. A few weeks later, you got your team calendar. We went over last week the championship bobbleheads. Those are going to be really cool. That's October 18th, January 11th, February 1st, February 27th, and March 21st. So those will all be great. Hunter, any ones that stuck out to you?
Well, I got a couple. There's the Grateful Dead night on November 16th, also the day after my 27th birthday. All the Deadheads can come out for that game. I look forward to seeing the audience shots from Sportsnet Pittsburgh for that game. I think that's going to be a lot of fun seeing which deadheads come out and just dress up for Grateful Dead night. That's going to be cool. Also, yes, if you are a big fan of Star Wars night is on January 9th. If you want to wear your Darth Vader costume, Emperor Sheev Palpatine, Luke Skywalker, Jango Fett, Boba Fett, whatever you want, you can go to that game. And there's also Halloween night on October 31st against Anaheim. I cannot wait to see the costumes for that game on Sportsnet Pittsburgh. I'll be watching the game, obviously, while I pass out candy to the trick-or-treaters that come by my house, but still, that's going to be a lot of fun seeing that. Those are just some of my favorite theme nights that I saw. I know the one that you probably circled as well, your WWE night in December. I'm sure you're going to go as, if I had to guess, Cody Rhodes or something like that. You can go dress up as him. Maybe you can go as, I don't know, Shawn Michaels if you want to, considering he's been to Pittsburgh for a few games especially during the 2016 run to the Stanley Cup.
Hey, for all my WWE listeners who are fans like I am, just on December 17th, if I'm not working, I'll be there that night channeling my inner Jey Uso, and I'll be yeeting inside PPG Paints Arena. But something you said, though, is on a serious note, two of the most fun games of the year absolutely are the Halloween game, because it's always a party atmosphere. People are in costume. They're having a good time. And then the same thing a month later, the Thanksgiving Eve game, Wednesday, November 27th. If you are someone who enjoys a very rowdy crowd, it skews younger, but it's always a fun night inside PPG Paints Arena, and you haven't experienced it, Thanksgiving Eve is a blast of a game. Yes, you will have to deal with some drunks, because everybody knows that Thanksgiving Eve is a big drinking night. Don't be dumb. Don't drive. Call Uber. Have a designated driver. But Thanksgiving Eve is always a fun game. It's a much lighter atmosphere. People are much louder. So if that's a game that suits your interests, do not miss that one.
That and the game itself is usually always very entertaining. I feel like a lot of times over the years, the Penguins will play that game and there'll just be so many crazy back and forth swings. And it's like, I feel like both teams are ready for the holidays, which is why you're seeing just crazy blunders on both sides. But that's always been one of my favorite games to watch, just because of how crazy it is just on the ice. And then there's also one more I did want to mention, Margaritaville night on March 30th against Ottawa. That's going to be really cool to see. So yeah, some really cool promo nights on the schedule for this year.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people kind of clamoring about this on social media today, of like, oh, they're so cooked, they're past their contention when they're doing all these promos and theme nights. Guys, they've always done this. This has been a thing for at least the last 10 years. Like, they have been introducing this, or not introducing this, they've been doing this for quite a while now.
I've seen them do the 70s nights, the 80s nights, the 90s nights. Those are also a lot of fun as well. They do. Yeah, they mix them up every year.
And I'll add this final thought before we close out the show here. Guys, I worked in minor league hockey for quite a while. Like, this is just a thing that teams do in every league. It's in every league basically except the NFL. Like, whether it's MLB, NBA, NHL, pros, minors, it's just a way to get fans in the building. It's just a way to sell the sport to more people. It's a way to grow the sport, because, hey, you might go in there for the Deadhead night and you might not be a big time hockey fan, but you want to go hang out with some other Grateful Dead fans, and you watch a hockey game, turns out really seem to enjoy it. And all of a sudden we got new hockey fans. So yes, guys, I know that the glory days are probably in the rearview mirror at this point, but these are fun. It's just a lot of fun. It's something they've been doing for a while. And hey, what's more fun than going to a hockey game? Not a lot of things, but that will do it.
We gotta do more like rock themes. I'm also just speaking as someone who went to see Alice Cooper and Rob Zombie at Star Lake last night. So I'm probably still on that high right now. And then I saw Green Day the year before that, well, not the year before that, a couple days before that, excuse me. So I guess I'm just riding that rock wave these last few days at this point.
Yeah. Get your concert fun in now, Hunter, because, oh boy, we got 5 episodes a week coming here in just about 2 weeks. So that means training camp starting up, and that means there's going to be a lot more hockey content for us to talk about. But that's going to do it for the Wednesday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. We appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to join us and talk some hockey. We will be back with a brand new episode for you on Friday. Unless there's any big news, then we'll have another episode between now and then. But for Hunter Hodes, I'm Patrick Damp. Thank you as always for tuning in, and we will be back on Friday.